Unit conversions. Are unit conversions important?
Tell you what, Bart, I'll trade you the weight of a bowling ball on the 8th moon of Jupiter for my lunch for the weight of a feather on the 2nd moon of Neptune from your lunch. Well, okay. There you go.
I'll trade you 1,000 picoliters of my milk for 4 gills of yours.
Well, all right.
Anything you say.
Bart, would you wager your cupcake against mine? Save your breath.
What do you think of the new kid?
Rather mediocre genius. Yes, not very bright at all.
So why might we want to know how to convert units? If I need 20 feet of rope for a project, is that the same as 30 yards? What if I wanted to purchase $20 worth of clothing in Mexico and they wanted to charge me 500 pesos? Is that the same value? Maybe you want to use units to check an answer or help you solve a challenging problem. Maybe you just want to avoid embarrassing yourself like our friend Bart. Whatever the reason, we will need to start with some math. Let's start simple. 1 divided by 1. 1 goes into 1 one time. Simple enough, let's get a little bit more advanced. 2 divided by 2. Sounds easy. 2 goes into 2 one time. Careful, not 2. 2 divided by 2 is not 2. Let's kick it up another notch. Let's say we took any number and divided it by itself. We'll use the variable x to represent any number. Something goes into itself one time. So whenever something is divided by itself, the result is 1. These are examples of what we can call a fancy form of 1, FFO for short. A fancy form of 1 is a fraction with the numerator equal to the denominator. What if we use something other than numbers? 13 apples divided by 13 apples. 1 apple, right? Wrong. 13 apples goes into 13 apples one time. Units and numbers act the same way. Whenever the value on top is equal to the value on the bottom of a fraction or ratio, that's a fancy way of saying 1. Now let's refresh our memory on how to multiply fractions. If we have 2 fractions, we multiply straight across. We multiply the numerators with each other and multiply the denominators with each other. Let's say we wanted to multiply a whole number like 6 to a fraction like 1/3. 6 can be represented as the fraction 6 over 1. Then we multiply the tops and the bottoms. 3 goes into 6 2 times. Let's see what happens if we add units. What if instead of multiplying 6 and 1 over 3, we multiply 6 minutes and 1 over 3 minutes? 2 minutes, right? No. Remember, we multiply fractions straight across. So this would be 6 minutes over 3 minutes, which can be rewritten as 6 over 3 times minutes over minutes. Last I checked, minutes are the same as minutes, which would make this a fancy form of 1. And 3 goes into 6 2 times. So 6 minutes times 1 over 3 minutes is 2, not 2 minutes. Now let's talk about unit conversions. Unit conversions are a way to compare and to communicate and compare measurements or calculations to others who use different standards. There are 2 main rules. After a unit conversion, the original value must remain unchanged. The measurement cannot be bigger or smaller. The new units must measure the same type of property. If you start with a unit which measures time, like hours, your new units cannot measure length, like meters. They must also measure time. How might we convert 3 meters to centimeters? Multiply by 100, obviously, but 3 meters times 100 is 300 meters. That makes our converted value bigger than the original measurement, and in units of meters. So how can we change the meters to centimeters without changing the original value? We could multiply by 1, but that might not help very much. What about a fancy form of 1? If we start with 3 meters, we can only multiply by a fancy form of 1, which means the numerator and denominator must be equal. In the previous example, we were able to get rid of the minutes by dividing by minutes. So our fancy form of 1 should have meters in the denominator. And because we want to convert to centimeters, we should have centimeters in the numerator. In the fancy form of 1, the numerator and denominator must be equal. I know 100 centimeters is equal to 1 meter. If we multiply our fraction straight across like we're supposed to, we see this is the same as 300 times a meter times a centimeter divided by a meter. And voila! A meter over a meter is a fancy form of 1. When we multiply everything else together, we see that 3 meters is equal to 300 centimeters. Now try converting 3 meters to feet. You'll start with the fraction 3 meters over 1 and multiply by a fancy form of 1, which means our numerator and denominator must be equal. If we want to get rid of the meters and convert to feet, we need units of meters in our denominator. Because it's a fancy form of 1, the numerator and denominator must be equal. I need an equal relationship between meters and feet. I don't know how many feet are in a meter, but I do know how many centimeters are in a meter. So we'll use that fancy form of 1 and get to feet later. So now my units of meters will divide to 1. I will show they divide to 1 by crossing them out. Note, canceling out is when two numbers add up to 0 or subtract to 0. This is not canceling out. The units divide away to 1. Again, I need a fancy form of 1, but I don't know how many centimeters are in a foot. I do know how many centimeters are in an inch, and then how many inches are in a foot. My units of centimeters will divide to 1 with the units of centimeters in the denominator. This is division and not canceling. And my units of inches will divide to 1 with my units of inches in the denominator. Again, this is division and not canceling. Now our problem has become much simpler. We can multiply all the numbers in our numerator and all of our numbers in our denominator to get one ratio. And finally, we can divide to find our converted value. 3 meters is equal to approximately 10.2 feet. Let's review the steps for unit conversion. Write your original value as a ratio, or a fraction. Multiply your value by a fancy form of 1 with your original units in the denominator. This will allow our value to stay the same while the units divide away to 1. Repeat step 2 until all undesirable units have divided away to 1 and you are left with units you were trying to convert to. Check to make sure your original units and final units measure the same thing. Finally, multiply your fraction to get your converted value. Let's try converting 21 hours to seconds. We're going to write our original value as a ratio. We'll multiply by a fancy form of 1 so that our hours divide away to 1. We'll have to multiply by another fancy form of 1. This way our minutes divide away, and we're left with units of seconds. Now we multiply our fractions to get our converted value. 75,600 seconds. Convert 60 miles per hour to meters per second. Note, there are 1,609 meters in 1 mile. Write your original value as a ratio. Multiply by a fancy form of 1. The miles divide. Multiply by another fancy form of 1. Now our hours in the denominator will divide with hours in the numerator. Multiply by a final fancy form of 1 to get our minutes to divide away, and we're left with meters per second. We'll multiply our fractions to get our converted value. 26.82 meters per second.